Night over the mountains always looks peaceful from a distance. From far enough away, this valley could be a postcard, a scatter of white floodlights in a sea of black rock, a small NATO forward operating base tucked into a hollow between jagged ridgelines. The sky is clear, the stars aggressive and bright, the air so thin and cold you can almost hear it. For a heartbeat, everything is calm. Then the first mortar lands. It doesn't arrive with a polite warning. There's no cinematic whistle, no time to shout incoming. One moment the night is quiet. The next a section of perimeter wall disappears in a roaring blossom of light and concrete dust. Shockwaves punch through the compound, flipping loose gear off tables and slamming doors in their frames. Alarms stutter awake, a rising, howling wail that echoes off the mountains. Tracer fire rips across the sky. Angry orange bees stitching lines between the black outlines of the ridges and the floodlit base below. Within seconds, the valley becomes a bowl of ricochets and shrapnel. Another mortar lands, closer to the main gate this time, showering the parked trucks with burning fragments. We drop into the perspective of Staff Sergeant Rafik, a squad leader pinned behind a low concrete barrier near that gate. He isn't supposed to be here. Not right here, not like this. 10 seconds ago, he was walking across the yard with a mug of instant coffee, thinking about a call home. Now half his squad is flat on their faces behind the same slab of concrete, boots digging into sandbags, helmets pressed low as bullets slap the wall and spark off the gravel. Rafik peeks over the edge of the barrier for a fraction of a second. What he sees makes his stomach turn. This isn't random harassing fire. It's coordinated. 2 machine guns on the far ridge, firing in measured bursts, are raking the gate from slightly offset angles, chewing up the open ground. Every time one gun pauses to swap belts, the other one picks up the rhythm, keeping the defenders pinned. The mortars aren't blind either. The rounds are walking in, bracketing the command post, then shifting toward the squat concrete building that houses the base's intel section. Gate, this is Ops report. A voice snaps in his ear. He ducks as a burst of rounds chews a fresh line across the barrier. Gate taking heavy fire. Rafik shouts back into his handheld radio. Multiple machine guns in the north ridgeline, mortars, RPG signatures. He never finishes the report. The radio explodes into overlapping calls, a mess of voices trying to do the same thing at once. Tower 2 is hit. Aid stations taking shrapnel. We need, where the hell is? Then the chaos cuts. His headset fills with a solid wall of static. Not the crackling kind of bad reception, but a dense, suffocating hiss like someone has thrown a blanket over every frequency at the same time. The digital display on the radio flickers, loses its channel settings, and cycles uselessly. Comms just died. One of his privates says, wide-eyed. Above them, another mortar lands closer, the concussion bouncing Rafik's helmet off the concrete. Dust rains down in sheets. Somewhere beyond the wall, someone screams for a medic. In the command post, the company commander feels his stomach drop as the long-haul radios die in the same second. Screens that should be showing link status and satellite feeds blink to angry red. The primary satellite dish is intact. The generators are humming. But every attempt to reach higher headquarters ends in the same cold silence. It isn't a power issue. It isn't a storm. Someone out there is smothering their comms on purpose. Down at the main gate, the attackers press their advantage. On the far slope, 2 RPG teams hunker behind rocks, loading and reloading, moving with the calm of people who've rehearsed this exact pattern. Every time the defenders on the wall try to rise and fire, a new mortar round slams into the berm behind them, or a burst from the ridge guns forces them back down. The base sits in a shallow valley, low ground surrounded by bad news. Every ridgeline is a firing position. Every firing position is occupied. The kill box is closing. Rafik risks another glance over the barrier and spots the worst of it. 30 meters away, in the open, an armored truck has been repurposed as an improvised ambulance. Its rear doors thrown open, its benches full of groaning shapes in blood-streaked uniforms. Medics are crawling over them, working by the strobing light of flares and burning fuel. The truck is stuck. The engine died when the first mortar landed close, peppering its hood with shrapnel. Now it sits there like a gift. One of the RPG teams shifts focus. Rafik watches the gunner shoulder his launcher, the assistant feeding him a fresh warhead, both of them silhouetted against the night sky. Even with the distance, even through dust and smoke, he can see their calm. They've chosen the truck. RPG on the wounded. RPG on the wounded. He roars into a radio that doesn't work anymore. The gunner settles into his stance, takes a second to line it up, and in that breathless pause, the entire compound seems to hold its breath with him. The defenders can see it. The medics can't. The wounded certainly can't. And then, a single distant crack cuts through the roar. Not a mortar, not a machine gun, a rifle. It's so far away it's almost delicate, like a knuckle tapped on a table in the middle of a concert hall. A fraction of a second later, the rock just above the RPG gunner's shoulder explodes into a puff of dust and stone fragments. The gunner doesn't have time to react. He jerks as if pulled by an invisible string. The launcher tips sideways, clatters against the rock. The assistant freezes, eyes wide, then scrambles back, dragging the weapon with him as tracers start lacing past his position. Rafik blinks. He doesn't understand what he just saw. The breeze takes the dust from the impact and carries it down the slope. All he knows is that the RPG didn't fire. The truck still exists. His wounded are still breathing. Another crack. This time it's aimed higher. On the far ridge to the west, a third muzzle flash, one of the enemy's own snipers, winks out like someone flipped a switch. The shots he was sending into the aid station's flimsy roof stop mid-burst. For a second, the only rounds hitting that building are stray fragments. Somewhere else, a gunner in the back of a pickup, its bed-mounted machine gun raking the outer wire, suddenly slumps over his weapon. The gun continues to fire for a heartbeat, cycling uselessly at the sky, before it runs empty and spins to silence. Rafik and his team look at each other. Who the hell is that? Someone breathes. The commander is asking the same thing in the command post. He's bent over the operations map, one hand pressed his headset, listening to static with occasional broken words punching through. Tower 3, is it you engaging West Ridge? Nothing. Tower 3, confirm? A different voice, ragged and breathless, cuts in. Tower 3 is gone. Took a direct hit. We got nobody up there. He stares at the map. That tower was their only elevated position with a line of sight to those ridges. The distant shots they're hearing, the ones that are saving lives, aren't coming from any marked location on his board. Another impossible shot lands. On the north slope, a small assault group has been moving under cover of the machine guns, zigzagging through rocks toward a dead ground pocket near the intel building. A leader in a darker jacket, gesturing with quick, precise movements, is driving them forward. He's at 1 second. The next, he staggers as if shoved, a dark stain blooming across his chest. He collapses without a sound, and the fire team around him stutters to a stop, suddenly leaderless. The rhythm of the attack falters. Now, between each low, disciplined crack from the unknown rifle, the base's own fire starts to rise, defenders regaining enough courage and space to lift their heads a little higher above the walls. In the chaos, we cut away, just for a heartbeat, to the edge of the world. High on a dark ridge, or what looks like one from the distance, a solitary figure lies pressed into the rocky ground. No floodlights, no sandbags, no fancy optics, just a body in the dust, a rifle braced on a simple backpack. We don't see a face, just gloved hands, one steady on the stock, the other on the trigger, breathing slow. The rifle scope is spiderwebbed with cracks along one edge, catching faint starlight. She tilts her head slightly to compensate, finding clear glass through the damage. She makes a small adjustment, just a millimeter or two, as if the entire base depends on that fraction. Fires. The recoil barely moves her. The sound lags behind the flash, a quiet exhale compared to the scream of mortars. She pauses, watching for the hint of movement that tells her if the shot landed. Then shifts, scanning. Down below, no one knows her name yet. In the dim interior of the aid station, lit by flickering emergency lamps and the dull glow of headlamps, A nurse ducks as shrapnel punches through a window and showers the floor with glass. One of the patients on the nearest cot flinches, instinctively trying to curl around a bandaged leg. Her forebag sways. Blood drips onto the concrete. "Just hold on," a medic murmurs, trying to push a rolling crash cart back upright. On the next cot over, a young soldier with a hastily bandaged shoulder is staring at the ceiling, dazed from blood loss and morphine. Outside, the distant cracks of that unseen rifle cut through the noise. Each one is a question mark. She blinks, focuses on the medic's face leaning over her, then finds the strength to speak. She wasn't even supposed to be here," the soldier whispers, voice barely audible over the distant thunder. "She was just visiting." The medic frowns. "Who?" "My sister," the soldier breathes. She's not on the roster." Another crack floats in from the ridge, followed by the distant pop of an explosion as something important on the enemy's side stops working. The camera pulls back, out through the torn roof of the aid station, up over the courtyard where defenders and attackers are trading fire, over the shattered tower that should have had their only overwatch. The valley becomes a diagram of chaos. Lines of tracers, arcs of mortar trajectories, pockets of movement and stillness. Above it all, we find that solitary figure again, outlined for a split second by the pale muzzle flash of her next shot. Freeze frame. The world holds on that image. A lone shooter on a forgotten height, rifle pressed to a cracked optic, body barely more than a shadow against the rock. The narration cuts in over the frozen frame, calm and certain, making a promise. This is the night a quiet visitor turned the tide of a war she thought she'd left behind. The frame snaps back into motion, the shots sound finally catching up, and we smash cut hard at daylight, to the roar of a transport aircraft engine spinning down, to the earlier hours that set all of this in motion. 12 hours earlier, the same valley looks almost harmless. The sun hangs high and unforgiving over the mountains, turning the rocks into sheets of white glare and making the air above the runway shimmer. A dusty transport plane rolls to a stop at the far end of the strip, its engines winding down with a deep metallic sigh. The rear ramp grinds open. Heat hits like a wall, followed by the thick odor of fuel, dust, and the faint tang of burned coffee wafting from somewhere on base. The first figure down the ramp isn't in camouflage. She steps into the sunlight in faded cargo pants and a plain jacket, a simple civilian backpack slung over one shoulder. No rank, no patches, but she moves like someone who's worn all of it for years. This is Mara. She pauses at the bottom of the ramp, squinting against the glare, letting her eyes adjust. Old habits kick in immediately. Before she even decides to, she's scanning, left along the perimeter fence, noting the towers, right toward the cluster of low, concrete buildings, then up, always up, toward the ridge lines that ring the valley. High ground. Lots of it. She notes it and then, deliberately, tries to push the thought away. She's not here for that. A shout cuts through the engine noise. About time. A woman in uniform jogs across the tarmac, helmet clipped to her vest, sleeves rolled. The resemblance is instant and striking. Same eyes, same jawline, same half-smirk held in reserve at one corner of the mouth. Lena. She skids to a stop in front of Mara, breathing a little harder than she wants to admit, and for a second both of them just stare, taking in the changes. Mara's hair is a little shorter now. Lena has new lines at the corners of her eyes from too many night shifts. Then the moment snaps, and they're hugging, suddenly and fiercely, the weight of years and canceled visits crashing together in one fast, awkward tangle. "You look terrible," Lena says into her shoulder. "You look like you live inside a radio," Mara shoots back. They both laugh, the sound genuine, a small pocket of normal in a place built entirely for the abnormal. As they walk off the tarmac, Lena points things out with a mixture of boredom and pride. Off to your right, the finest latrines this side of the river. Behind us, the runway, obviously. Over there, the company headquarters, where boring people pretend PowerPoint slides are combat multipliers. Mara half listens, half maps. The base isn't huge, but it's busy. Low, HESCO-ringed buildings cluster around a central gravel yard. A narrow road loops around the compound, connecting the main gate to motor pools, fuel points, and a small row of living quarters. Towers mark each corner of the wall, their metal stairs glinting hot. Beyond the wire, the terrain rises abruptly, jagged and unforgiving. Some slopes are bare rock. Others are littered with scrub and scattered boulders that would make excellent shooting positions. Lena waves toward one particularly steep ridge behind a squat, windowless structure. That's our pride and joy, Intel. That's where I sit and listen to bad guys talk about each other. Mara's gaze slides from the building to the ridge directly above it. It's close. Too close. From the right kind of spot up there, you could look straight down on that roof, see the paths between it and the command post, the path to the fuel point, the whole back half of the base. She files that away without meaning to. Lena notices her looking and bumps her shoulder. Don't start, okay? This place is quiet. Sleepy posting. Biggest drama we've had in the last month was a generator cough that made everyone complain about cold showers. Must have been brutal, Mara says dryly. Savage, Lena replies. People still talk about it. They cut across the yard toward the chow hall. As they pass the main gate, Mara's eyes flicked to the guard shack, and the scanning mirror leaned against the wall. The soldiers on duty give them a curious glance, taking in the civilian visitor. Inside the chow hall, the air is cooler, smells heavily of disinfectant and overcooked meat. The place hums with conversation, metal trays clanking against tables. It's a small universe with its own gravity. This is where the real intel is, Lena says. Who's mad at who lost a bet, who's hiding extra dessert. At a table near the back, a captain with tired eyes and a shaved head sits hunched over a plate, radio on the table beside him. He glances up as they approach. Lena straightens instinctively. Sir, this is my sister, Mara. The captain rises halfway, offers his hand. Heard a lot about you. Finally decided to see where your tax dollars go. Something like that, Mara says, shaking his hand. His grip is firm. His eyes flick over her, noting posture, scanning for clues that don't match the harmless civilian label. Across the room, a younger specialist at another table is mid-sentence, gesturing with a fork at a portable radio resting near his tray. I'm telling you, it's not just sunspots. We've been getting weird spikes for a week, like someone leaning on a mic, but with this rhythmic thing in the pattern. His friend rolls his eyes. You just want a mystery. Got plenty of mystery already, a new voice says. An intel major walks past their table, a ruggedized black case tucked close under one arm, like it's worth more than the entire building. He nods at Lena. Your server room ready for the VIPs? Always, sir, Lena says. We dusted the place and everything. Mara's attention lingers on the case. It's dented but clearly new enough to still carry shine on the hinges. Whatever's in there, it matters. As the major moves on, the radio on the specialist table crackles. A brief burst of static, sharp, stuttering, cuts through the dining hall noise. It's not the normal hiss of distance. There's a faint pattern to it, almost like someone flicking a switch on and off in a rhythm. The specialist frowns, leans closer, and taps the side of the radio. The static cuts. Normal chatter resumes. See, he says, that's what I'm talking about. His buddy shrugs. Atmospherics. Heat. Solar whatever. You're not that important. Mara glances over. Her brows pull together. It's subtle, the way the interference comes and goes, but something in the spacing nags at her. She doesn't make a big scene about it. Just files the sound away in the same quiet mental crate as the two close ridges and the line of sight over the intel building. Later, when the lunch rush thins, Mara and Lena claim a table by the window. Sunlight slants in, catching dust in the air. You know he undersold you, right? Lena says, nodding toward where the captain has resumed his meal. Who? The captain. I told him you were the best shot I've ever seen. He just nodded and said, we'll see if we can find her a range day. Like you're some hobbyist. I'm not looking for a range day, Mara says, pushing peas around her tray. No, Lena says more gently. You're looking for any excuse not to touch a rifle again. Mara's jaw tightens. I'm done with that. The words come out flat, practiced. She said them enough times to people who weren't there, who don't see the nights she doesn't sleep. Lena watches her for a second, sees the shutters drop. She backs off, changing the subject, but the tension lingers in the air like cigarette smoke. That afternoon, they walk the perimeter. Officially, it's just Lena showing her sister around. Unofficially, it's Mara's brain doing what it always does, mapping. They stroll past the fuel point, a cluster of bladders and hoses behind wire. Then along the outer road, boots crunching gravel. Lena jokes about giving Mara the tourist version of patrol, pointing out which guard dogs hate, which supply sergeants, and which shipping containers people use for clandestine workouts. Mara's eyes aren't on the containers. On a distant hill, outside the wire, a white utility van sits near a cell tower. Two men stand by its open rear doors, ostensibly fiddling with equipment. But there's no ladder, no toolboxes, no harnesses. They don't move with the automatic rhythm of workers who've done this 100 times. They're watching more than they're working. Who's that? Mara asks, nodding toward the hill. Local telecom crew, I think, Lena says. They come through sometimes. Half this country runs on duct tape and goodwill. You check their paperwork? Lena snorts. Mara, I check satellite passes and handset metadata. Physical paperwork is ops headache. Mara doesn't argue, but she watches the van for another long moment. One of the men raises something to his eye. Binoculars? A camera? The distance makes it hard to tell. Then he lowers it and ducks back into the van. At the main gate, later, the market outside has a strange feel. Usually, Lena explains, there are at least a few locals trading. Rugs, batteries, questionable DVDs. Kids dart between stalls, laughing, pestering soldiers for candy. Today, several stalls stand half-closed. The kids are absent. A young man stands across the road, phone held just high enough to be obvious. He points at the base, slowly panning. The gate guards call out to him, more annoyed than alarmed, and a translator moves to shoo him away. He lingers a second too long before turning off the road, his expression unreadable. Friendly content creator, Lena jokes. We're probably viral somewhere by now. Mara doesn't smile. She tracks the young man until he's gone, then glances back up at the hills, at that same white van, now parked a few hundred meters down from where it was earlier. Back inside the wire, as the day bleeds into evening, they stop outside an older, somewhat neglected structure near the far corner of the base. A narrow metal tower rises from its roof, an old communications mast bearing small, rusting dishes. You still use that? Mara asks. Lena shakes her head. Nah, new satellite rig took over most of the heavy lifting. That one's mostly backup. Nobody likes climbing it, so it just kind of sits. Haunted, probably. Mara looks up. From here, the view would be ridiculous. Over the wall, over the yard, straight toward the ridges and the approaches behind the Intel building. It's ugly, Lena says. Don't look at it too long. In their shared room that night, a small, tidy space off a narrow hallway. Lena unlocks a side door that leads into the heart of her world, a server room humming with fans. Racks of equipment blink with quiet, meaningful light. Thick bundles of cables snake along the ceiling, disappearing into walls. Here it is, she says. The crown jewels. Mara leans against the doorframe, arms folded, listening to the hum. These racks hold mission logs, patrol routes, encrypted traffic. Anything high value that passes through this region touches this room at some point, Lena says. Her voice is matter-of-fact, but there's pride there too. If anything ever happened, this would be the last place I'd be. Nobody's dumb enough to hit the one spot they'll never get out of. Mara raises an eyebrow. That's not how dumb works. Come on, Lena says, rolling her eyes. We're in the middle of nowhere. It's quiet out here. Intel's picked up nothing serious for weeks. We've got protocols and a quick reaction team. We're fine. Later, lights out, the two of them lie in their bunks in the dark. Through the thin wall, they can hear the bass winding down. The distant thrum of generators, the occasional clank of a closing door, a burst of laughter from the rec room, then a snippet of radio chatter bleeding in before someone dials the volume down. Lena is asleep almost instantly. Years of night shifts have taught her to grab rest whenever it appears. Mara lies awake. Her heart thumps steadily against the mattress. She counts the beats between the distant, short radio squawks outside, reconstructing patterns without wanting to. Every mutter of static reminds her of the interference from earlier, the odd rhythm embedded in it. She closes her eyes and sees a different scope, a different country, civilians erupting into her field of view at the worst possible second. The shot she took anyway because the call was take it now or lose them, and the way the world looked after. She rolls onto her back, staring at the faint lattice of shadows on the ceiling. She tells herself she's just here as a sister, just visiting, but her mind refuses to stop running what-if scenarios. What if the van is more than it looks? What if the interference is more than weather? What if someone is watching these routines the way she did today, counting steps, measuring response times, building a map? Outside, the stars will slowly over the ridges. On one of those hills, the white van's taillights finally wink out as it slips away into the dark. Inside the wire, Mara listens to the bass settle and tries, unsuccessfully, to convince herself that tomorrow will be as quiet as everyone promises. Evening returns to the valley wearing the same colors as the night before. Orange stripes burn along the horizon, then fade as the sun drops behind the peaks. Floodlights click on in sequence, washing the yard in harsh white. The bay slides into its routines like a familiar drill. Shift change at the gate. Hum of engines as a patrol rolls back in. Voices in the chow hall thinning out as the late shift grabs a quick bite before heading to posts. In the rec room, a card game is in full swing. A handful of soldiers sit around a scarred wooden table, boots up on crates, arguing over rules as loudly as they argue over politics. The TV in the corner plays some ancient sitcom dubbed into a language none of them speak. Mara sits on a battered couch along the wall, a mug of coffee cooling in her hands. Lena stands near the doorway, glancing at her watch. "You sure you don't want me to get you a visitor badge that says official couch tester?" Lena asks. "I'm competing for best inert object," Mara replies. "It's a tight field." Lena snorts. "I have to go run a few things for the late shift. You going to be okay here without adult supervision?" "I'll try not to reorganize your servers," Mara says. Lena leans down, squeezes her shoulder briefly, then vanishes down the hallway toward the intel section, coffee thermos under one arm, tablet in hand. Mara watches her go. She doesn't like how quiet the radios sound tonight. Not the content, there's always some chatter, but the quality. Every so often, a faint warble threads through the background like someone rubbing their finger along the rim of a glass. The radio tech mentioned it again at dinner. The same rhythmic interference, but stronger now. She takes a sip of cold coffee and grimaces. Somewhere near the motor pool, lights flicker. It's small at first, just a brief dimming, then back to full strength. The generators keep humming, steady and reliable. The flicker repeats, a fraction longer this time. One of the mechanics looks up from his work, frowning toward the power shack. Inside the command post, the captain notices it too. The monitors on the far wall momentarily lose signal, then snap back. He glances at the generator status, green, and makes a mental note to have someone check the cables in the morning. He never gets the chance. The next flicker never ends. Every screen in the room goes black. For one terrible second, there's nothing but the dim emergency lights and the glow of analog map lamps. Then backup systems kick in, and the screens reboot. Icons begin to populate, but one panel on the side wall stubbornly remains red, the external satellite link. The long-haul radios die with a soft click. "Heck," the captain calls out. "Talk to me." A corporal at the comm station taps his headset, then his console, eyes narrowing. "Sir, I'm losing the satellite net. Rebooted twice, no joy. It's like something's sitting on our frequency." "Switch routes," the captain orders. "Try the secondary." "Already did," the corporal says, an edge in his voice now. "It's not just one link. Feels like we're inside a bubble." In the intel building, Lena's screens twitch as well. The encrypted channels she monitors suddenly show gaps where continuous traffic should be. She checks her connections, checks the local network. "Come on," she mutters, fingers flying over the keyboard. Before she can raise anybody on the radio text channel, the first mortar hits. This time, there is a warning, a fraction of a second of distant whistling, before the blast tears through the quiet. The floor jumps under her feet. Ceiling tiles crash down. Somewhere outside, a vehicle alarm starts, shrieking until another blast cuts it off. The world outside the narrow window turns white with dust and light. Across the base, defenders move on instinct. Sirens howl, the same rising note as the night in the cold open. Soldiers drop their cards and sprint for helmets and vests. In the rec room, one of the card players is halfway out of his chair when a second mortar round lands close enough to blow glass inward, throwing shards across the table. Mara is already on her feet. "Let's go," someone yells, motioning toward the interior corridors. Another mortar drops, this one landing near the main gate, where Rafiq's squad will soon be fighting for their lives. For the moment, all anyone feels is the pressure wave washing through their lungs. In a command post, the captain slams his palm onto the alarm panel and barks orders into a dead radio. Defense posture 3. Give me tower reports. Somebody find out where this is coming from. Local nets still work for now. Squad and platoon channels crackle to life. Voices overlapping, the beginnings of the same frantic chorus that will soon be cut off completely. Outside, the pattern becomes clear, at least to those trained to see it. The mortars aren't random. They fall in tight groups around 3 critical points: the main gate, the command post, and the intel building. Each target is bracketed, rounds walking in with methodical precision. It's the mute signature of careful observation and pre-plotted coordinates. The valley's terrain, so scenic in daylight, turns into an enemy ally as the attackers use elevation to drop rounds into courtyards and behind walls. The base's low position, once an afterthought, becomes a trap. In the intel building, a ceiling light blows out, plunging half the room into shadow. Lena is thrown to the floor by the shock of a near miss. Dust rains from the ceiling. For a moment, all she hears is the ringing in her ears. Then the shouting starts. "Get away from the windows," someone yells. She scrambles to her knees, grabs the ruggedized case that the intel major brought in earlier, and hauls it toward a more secure interior corner. Around her, analysts are diving under desks, clutching drives, knocking over coffee mugs. The door bursts open. Mara appears in the frame, hair dusted white from plaster, eyes sharp and focused in a way Lena hasn't seen in a long time. "Moo!" Mara snaps, already crossing the room. Another mortar hits close enough to bow the wall inward for a heartbeat. The windows shatter. Glass and debris spray across desks. A fluorescent tube drops from the ceiling and explodes at Mara's feet. She doesn't flinch. She grabs Lena by the collar, yanking her away from the exterior wall, and shoves her toward the interior corridor. Inside now, they half run, half stumble down the hallway as dust pours from the ceiling. The walls tremble. Somewhere nearby, a man is yelling for a medic, voice cracking at the end. Mara should be in a bunker already. As a visitor, as a non-essential, the rule is simple: stay out of the way. But that part of her might as well be on another planet. Over the local net, clipped to a staffer's vest, voices are colliding. Tower 1 taking fire. Main gate under sustained. We're blind on higher. Repeat, blind. The jamming is tightening. The same pattern from the night before, now swelling until it drowns out anything beyond the wire. Higher command might as well be on Mars. In an interior corridor, Mara shoves open a heavy door leading to a concrete-lined bunker room and pushes Lena inside, dragging 2 other shaken staffers with her. Ceiling dust drifts down like gray snow. The room is lit by a single strip of emergency lighting, turning everyone's faces hollow. Shelves hold water bottles, rations stacked in boxes, medical kits. It's the kind of room that's supposed to feel safe. It doesn't. Mara moves to the far wall, where an old CCTV monitor sits bolted into a mount. The feed is flickering, again that power flicker, but still functioning in fits and starts. She flips through the cameras with fast, practice clicks. One shows the main gate, already under machine gun fire, sparks jumping from the metal as rounds strike. Another shows the motor pool, vehicles scattered, some already burning. Another shows the yard between the intel building and the aid station. In that image, tiny figures are moving along the ridgeline. She narrows her eyes. Laser designators wink faintly through the haze, little dancing points of bright red on walls and vehicles. Muzzle flashes stutter from positions she recognizes instantly, exactly where she had mentally pinned if I were them the day before. Every vulnerability she mapped on her walk is being exploited by someone else's plan. Lena, she says quietly, this is not random. They've been watching you. Lena, pale but forcing herself steady, is already hauling a hard drive case toward the heaviest interior corner. Focus on not getting killed first, she says, but her voice wobbles. Another blast slams into the building's exterior. The lights flicker again. A second later, a screaming whoosh rips overhead. RPG. The rocket hits near the intel building's corner, close to where their corridor meets the main office. The explosion blows an interior door off its hinges and sends shrapnel punching through the intervention wall like hail. One fragment catches Lena in the side. She gasps, staggers, and drops the case. For a split second, she seems confused. Then her hand comes away from her hip, soaked in red. Hey, Mara says, already moving. She catches Lena under one arm, lowers her to the floor with controlled speed, and tears open a first aid kit in the same motion. The world outside the bunker narrows to a tunnel. Noise, light, chaos. Inside, everything focuses on blood, bandage, pressure. Mara's hands move with steady efficiency. Tourniquet. Dressing. Check for exit wound. She blocks out the wet sound of Lena's breathing, the fear in her eyes. Do not leave me, Lena manages, fingers digging into Mara's sleeve. I'm not going anywhere, Mara lies automatically. The truth is clawing at her already. The local net crackles, full of frantic reports. Tower 2 is gone. I say again, Tower 2 is down. We've got multiple wounded at the gate. Anybody got eyes on West Ridge? They're walking round and on command. Static chews at the edges of every transmission. The enemy jammer squeezing the band from outside like a fist. Over one of the CCTV feeds, Mara sees Tower 2, a key corner position, slumped in on itself, smoke pouring from a gaping hole where its sandbags used to be. The camera angle is bad, but she could just make out a limp form at the base of the stairs. Then another feed catches her attention. The West Tower. It shows a lone body draped over the parapet, rifle half hanging over the edge. No movement, no muzzle flashes. Silenced. The sector that Tower used to dominate is now a blind spot, a long, dark slice of terrain connecting straight to the approaches behind the intel building and the server room. Footprints in the dust show movement there already. Mara's brain, no matter how much she has tried to tame it, runs a blistering calculation. The enemy isn't just trying to blow holes in the walls. They're pushing toward the intel hub. If they reach the server room, they could do one of two things: rip drives out and run, or destroy them and the personnel with them. Either way, they deny this base, and by extension, everyone who depends on its data, critical information. This isn't about body count. It's about the invisible map the base keeps of the region, patrol patterns, informant routes, safe houses, all sitting on racks in a room that nobody would be dumb enough to hit. Dust still floats in the bunker's stale air. Lena's breathing, shallow but steady, is loud in Mara's ears. Around them, other staff members hunch low, waiting for orders that aren't coming. The company commander's voice comes over the local net, tight and controlled. All non-essential personnel and visitors are to remain in hardened shelters. Repeat, stay in cover. Do not move to the outer perimeter unless specifically tasked. We will ride this out. Technically, Mara is as non-essential as it gets. She looks down at Lena, at the tourniquet turning her leg an ugly color, at the blood seeping into the bandage despite the pressure. Medics are overwhelmed. Getting one here could take precious minutes they don't have. The best she can do right now is keep the bleeding under control, keep Lena's head elevated, keep her conscious. But if she stays, if everyone follows protocol, nobody is going to that vacant tower. Nobody is cutting off the route the enemy is using to get to this very bunker. And nobody is shooting back from the heights. On the CCTV monitor, a grainy image shows figures moving through the dark behind the Intel building, bounding from cover to cover with practiced efficiency, taking advantage of a lane that should have been under constant watch. Mara's pulse steadies, not spikes. This is the moment that defines the rest. She feels Lena's fingers tighten again in her sleeve, hears the faint tremor in her voice as she says, "Promise me you're not going to go outside and do something stupid." Mara could say yes. She could sit here and hold pressure and hope someone else steps up, someone else sees the gap she sees. She could stay a visitor exactly as planned. Instead, she places Lena's hand gently back on her own chest, grabs the nearest medic by the arm, and pulls him closer. "Listen to me," she says, voice low but razor sharp. "You keep pressure here. Don't loosen that tourniquet unless you have a surgeon standing over you." She stays awake. You talk to her. You don't leave this spot. Got it. The medic blinks, nods automatically, pulled along by the current of her certainty. "Mara," Lena says, eyes wide. Mara leans in, forehead almost touching hers. "I will come back," she says. It's not a promise she knows she can keep, but it's the only one Lena can hear right now. But right now, there's nobody on the wall who can see what I see. Outside, another mortar lands close enough to make dust sift from the ceiling seams. The local net crackles again. A panicked voice calls, "We've lost eyes on the west approach." Repeat, "No overwatch. They're in the dead ground." Mara makes her choice. She squeezes Lena's hand once, hard, then stands up into the dim light of the bunker, feeling the weight of old skills like a familiar pack settling onto her shoulders. Protocol says stay. Every muscle in her body says move. She turns toward the door. When she steps out into the corridor, the base is already beginning to come apart at the seams. The bunker door groans shut behind her, cutting off Lena's voice and the cramped smell of concrete and fear. Out here, the corridor feels almost too open. Emergency lights cast long, thin stripes down the hallway, turning every doorway into a mouth of darkness. The building shudders as another round lands somewhere outside, dust floating through beams of light like slow-motion smoke. Adrenaline sharpens everything. Mara can hear individual footsteps, shouted orders, distant gunfire. Her world narrows to a simple chain. Find a weapon, find a route, find height. She shoulders past a pair of supply clerks hustling toward the shelter, murmuring apologies they barely process. At the far end of the hall, an MP stands at the entrance to the internal armory, one hand on his rifle, the other braced against the doorframe. "Ma'am, bunker's the other way," he says, eyes already scanning over her shoulder for more people. "I need a rifle," Mara says. His expression slips into confusion, then annoyance. "Can't issue to visitors. Orders are all non-essential." A new voice cuts in from behind her. She's not non-essential. She's qualified sniper, old designation. "Check your notes." The young radio tech from the chow hall sprints up, tablet under his arm, sweat cutting clean tracks through the dust on his forehead. "I saw her file," he pants. "She's cleared on long guns. We got a whole tower blown and nobody on Overwatch." The MP hesitates. Protocol fights instinct. Instinct wins by a nose. "Fine," he says, stepping aside. "But if the captain asks, this was your idea, specialist." "Gladly," the tech mutters. Inside the armory, the air is cooler. Neat racks of rifles line the walls, each slot labeled. Mara's hand moves without conscious thought to a designated marksman rifle that looks like it's seen some use, but not abuse. She checks the chamber. Clear. Checks the bore. Good enough. On a nearby shelf, magazines wait in neat rows. She grabs 3, shoves them into pouches on a plain plate carrier, and shrugs the vest on. A helmet follows, straps tighten with quick jerks. Finally, she clips a small, short-range radio to her chest rig, fingers lingering over the channel knob. 3 magazines. No spotter. No backup. She notes it, accepts it, and moves. Back in the corridor, the world is narrower now, all extraneous detail cut away. She passes a medic guiding a stretcher toward the bunker she just left, a young private with wide eyes clutching in forebag. They don't really see her. On the radio, the captain's voice cuts through, strained. All elements, report status. Gate, we hear you taking heavy contact. Tower 1, Tower 2, check in. Static answers. Tower 1, respond. Nothing but the faint hiss of the jamming at the edge of the local net, like the sound of far-off surf. Mara pushes up the stairwell toward ground level. As she climbs, the air grows hotter and thicker with smoke. The dull thump of impacts becomes a physical sensation against her ribs. At the top of the stairs, a small foyer opens into the yard. She stops just short of the doorway, back to the wall, and listens. Outside, machine gun fire pulses in waves. Short bursts from the towers, still holding. Longer, sustained rakes from the ridges, trying to suppress. In between, the peppering rattle of rifles, the occasional sharp crack of a single high-velocity round. Mortars fall in a rough rhythm, a vicious kind of heartbeat. 2 quick rounds in succession, a pause as the enemy adjusts, then another cluster. She counts under her breath. 1, 2, impact. 1, 2, impact. It's not perfect, but it's enough to know when there might be a window. On the third gap, she moves. She darts through the doorway into the open courtyard, boots slipping on loose gravel. The world outside is chaos. Smoke plumes rising from fresh craters, vehicles at ugly angles, bodies moving low and fast wherever there's cover. She runs low, rifle tucked close, eyes already on the far side of the yard. Another mortar lands behind her, the blast shoving her forward. She hits the ground hard behind a stack of pallets, ears buzzing, then pushes up again. No time to check for bruises. Ahead, the maintenance corridor entrance looms, a narrow, seldom used doorway in the side of an older building. She remembered Lena's offhand comment about a backup tower nobody likes to climb. The route comes together in her mind now. Armory to maintenance corridor to utility shaft, shaft to forgotten tower. It's insane. It's also the only option. She sprints the last few meters, counting again. 1, 2. Impact, this time somewhere near the motor pool, far enough to buy her 3 or 4 seconds of relative lull. The maintenance corridor is dim and narrow, smelling of oil and old paint. Pipes run along one wall, sweating condensation. Electrical conduits snake along the ceiling. She closes the door behind her, more out of instinct than hope, and moves at a fast walk. Running full out in a space like this is a good way to trip and break an ankle. Broken ankles don't climb towers. The floor vibrates with each distant impact. As she rounds a corner, she almost collides with a pair of engineers huddled over a junction box. They look up, startled. "Ma'am, this area is not safe," one says. "We're trying to keep the main grid from frying. You need to be in a shelter. The grid will be useless if you lose the intel building," she says, already moving past them. "Keep the lights on. I'll work on keeping your data breathing." They stare after her for a second, then go back to their cables, their world narrowed to circuits and breakers. At the end of the corridor, a rusting metal hatch blocks the path. Paint peels from its hinges. A sign above it reads, "Authorized personnel only," in stenciled letters half obscured by grime. She grabs the handle. It resists, stiff with disuse, then slams open with a screech. Beyond is a narrow utility shaft that smells like dust and rust. A vertical ladder is bolted into the wall, rungs worn shiny with the boot marks of countless long-ago climbers. She slings the rifle across her back, double-checks the straps on her plate carrier, and starts climbing. The shaft is tight. Her shoulders scrape metal. Every few meters, she passes a small landing where cables branch off into the base's skeleton. Dust rains from above with each nearby impact, blurring her vision and clogging her throat. Halfway up, she pauses, listening. Outside, the mortars are still falling, but the pattern is changing, getting closer to this corner of the base. The enemy is adjusting. Maybe they've seen movement. Maybe they're just tightening the noose. A muted, buzzing sound drifts in, barely audible through the metal. Drone. She climbs faster. The hatch at the top of the shaft is lighter, newer. Someone replaced this one a few years ago, then apparently forgot about it. She eases it open just enough to peer out. Cold night air licks at her face. She emerges onto the lower platform of the old communications tower. From here, the base fans out below her in a patchwork of light and shadow. The perimeter walls look small, the people behind them smaller. To one side, she can see the main gate under fire. To the other, the darker mass of the intel building crouches close to the wall. Beyond the fence, the ridges loom like black teeth. She's exposed up here. The tower's railings offer little cover, and some of the panels are missing, leaving gaps that drop sickeningly to the ground. She hears the drone again, louder. A small quadcopter hums somewhere above the tower, its rotors vibrating the night. A faint cone of light sweeps across the top of the structure, probing. She presses herself flat against the metal grating, tucking into the shadow of the upper platform. Her heartbeat thuds in her ears, but her breathing stays level, controlled. The drone's searchlight passes just centimeters from her boots, then moves on. It hovers for a moment near the tower, camera whirring softly as it scans the platforms. The noise of the battle below gives it cover. The defender's own tracer fire and muzzle flashes will make spotting its little light that much harder. Mara doesn't move. Motion is death right now. After a long, slow moment, the drone veers away, heading toward another segment of the wall, satisfied that this unused tower is just what it has always appeared to be. Empty. She waits another 3 breaths, then starts up the final ladder to the upper platform. The wind is sharper up here. It nips at the edges of her gloves, pulls at the loose ends of straps. She drops prone at once, the reflex so ingrained it bypasses thought, and unslings the rifle, sliding in front of her. Her backpack comes off and becomes a makeshift rest. She settles the rifle on it, presses her cheek to the stock, and brings the scope to her eye. The world snaps into a tunneled view, and then promptly fractures. A spiderweb of cracks fans out from the right side of the optics glass, distorting the image, bending light into weird angles. At the very edge, a full crack plows through, making a line of pure blur. She exhales slowly. Of course, some earlier concussion must have knocked the rifle around in the armory, or maybe it's been like this for weeks and no one noticed. For a novice, it would be a reason to panic, to give up. Mara shifts her head slightly, finding the slice of the lens that's still intact. It narrows her usable field of view, but not fatally. She can work with this. Has to. Through the clear portion of the glass, the base comes into focus in pieces. Aid station, low and vulnerable, lit by handheld lamps. Main gate, a churning knot of muzzle flashes and moving shadows. The yard, pitted with fresh craters, smoke hanging like fog. Beyond the wire, the ridges burn with intermittent fire. She sweeps slowly, building a mental grid. Sector by sector, threat by threat. On the radio clipped to her chest, static dominates, but she can hear enough. Gate is pinned. We need suppressive. Command. We're taking indirect from 3 positions. Estimate. The jamming is stronger up here, but it's not absolute. Elevation works for more than just bullets. She keys her mic. Command, this is Tower 4, she says, picking a designation that doesn't exist on any map, buying herself a sliver of anonymity. I'm on the old comms mast. I've got eyes on the west and north ridges. There's a pause, then a voice she recognizes. The captain. Tower 4. Say again your location. Old mast, far corner, she repeats. Not on your standard tower list. I can see the approach behind intel and the main gate. A sliver of disbelief creeps into his tone. Mara, is that you? Does it matter? She says. You wanted Overwatch. You've got it. He doesn't argue. He doesn't officially authorize her, either. But he doesn't order her down. Sometimes, silence is as good as permission. She settles her cheek back to the stock, breathes in once, breathes out once, and starts planning the sequence of shots that could keep this base alive. From up here, the battle is both larger and simpler. The chaos condenses into patterns, and patterns can be broken. Mara's first task isn't pulling the trigger. It's seeing. She divides the scene into a grid. Near left, near center, near right. Mid-left, center, right. Far left ridge, middle ridge, far right. In each box, she notes movement, numbers, and weapons. Her breathing slows. Her pulse settles into a rhythm that matches her mental count between those mortar impacts. She starts building her ladder. At the top are the enemy's force multipliers, the ones who, left unchecked, will kill the most of her people. Snipers, machine guns, RPG teams with clear lines to critical assets. Mortar spotters, the jammer team choking their comms. Below them are squad leaders, the ones whose hand signals keep fire and movement coordinated. Only after those are stripped away does anything like the average rifleman appear on the list. Target 1 reveals itself quickly. On the far ridge above the aid station, she spots the telltale glint of a scope just for a moment as someone adjusts position. A second later, a shot cracks down toward the thin roof of the medical building. She tracks the origin. The sniper is tucked behind a rock, rifle laid across a small pack, body angled just so. Professional. Comfortable. He's been doing this for at least as long as she has. She adjusts elevation, factoring in distance, long but within her comfort zone, and wind, which tugs gently at the smoke rising from below. The cracked glass of her scope distorts the edge of the image. She compensates, finding a sliver of clarity. Her finger takes up the slack in the trigger. She exhales a long, steady breath that seems to carry some of the noise of the battle away with it, leaving only a narrow corridor of focus between her and the target. The moment the crosshair steadies on the thin slice of visible profile, she squeezes. The rifle bucks in her shoulder. She rides the recoil, already shifting slightly to watch for impact. A half-second later, the figure on the ridge twitches sideways and goes limp behind the rock, rifle sliding down out of sight. Another shot from that position never comes. Below, medics throw themselves toward the wounded with new urgency, no longer pinned by precision fire punching through their tin roof. They don't know why it stopped, only that it did. On the radio, someone shouts, "Aid station, you're clear to move." You're clear. Target 2 is easier to find, harder to ignore. Near the main gate, a dark mass of a technical truck sits angled for maximum effect, its bed-mounted machine gun hammering rounds into the wall and the vehicles parked behind it. The gunner is standing half-exposed, braced against the recoil, sweeping the muzzle in arcs. Every burst sends chips of concrete flying from Rafiq's barrier. Every burst forces heads back down. Mara tracks the gunner first. She leads him by just a fraction, accounting for the truck's bounce, the way his torso shifts as he swings the weapon. The shot breaks. He jerks, crumples forward onto the gun, then slides sideways, hands scrabbling in an automatic reflex that can't overcome the physics of a bullet through bone. The machine gun continues to cycle, pointed harmlessly at the sky until the belt runs dry. The driver, realizing something is wrong, twists in his seat to look back just as Mara shifts aim slightly and sends a second round through the windshield. The truck lurches to a stop, engine idling, wheels turned at an awkward angle. For the defenders at the gate, it's as if the earth itself has offered them a shield. Rafiq wastes no time. "Use the truck," he bellows, motioning his squad forward. "Move up, move up." They spill out from behind their shattered barrier, running low, some dragging the wounded, some firing in controlled bursts. The disabled technical becomes a moving wall as they push it into a better position, its armored sides catching rounds that might have gone into flesh a minute ago. Target 3 is subtle but lethal. Near the fuel point, half hidden by a low wall, an RPG team edges closer with predatory patience. One fighter shoulders the launcher while another opens a fresh warhead, hands moving quickly. If they hit the fuel bladders, half the yard will turn into an inferno. The blast will chew through vehicles, supplies, anyone unlucky enough to be in the open. Mara shifts the scope, fighting the crack that now splits her view of their legs. She focuses on the shoulder line, on the angle of the launcher, on the thin strip of exposed cheek above the protective mask. She fires. The gunner's head snaps back, as if someone yanked it by the hair. The rocket clatters down into the dirt, pinwheels, then fires wild, streaking off at a crazy angle before detonating high on a rock face. A useless bloom of wasted energy. The assistant, stunned, drops flat, arms over his head. Mara doesn't send a second round. He's neutralized for now, and her ammo is finite. She moves on. On the local net, the captain's voice has shifted. There's still tension there, but also an edge of stunned opportunity. Gate team, advance to cover behind the technical and clear that outer ditch, he orders, riding the momentum. 8 station, give me 2 more litters moving now. You've got a window. Mara sweeps the mid-range of the grid again, looking for the next step in the ladder. She finds target 4 on a boulder that juts like a broken tooth from the ridge above the command post. A man in darker clothing stands there, unfazed by the chaos, holding a small radio to his mouth. Every time he speaks, a mortar lands within a few seconds, adjusting fire just enough to stay on top of moving targets. Spotter. He's the brain of the indirect fire. She watches his pattern. Talk, wait, observe, talk again. When he lifts a pair of binoculars to his eyes, their lenses catch a flicker of light. She times the breath with his pause between words. The crack of her shot reaches him almost at the same time as the bullet. He drops the binoculars, his body arching backward, then tumbles off the rock. The radio skitters away across the stone before coming to rest at the edge. For the next 30 seconds, mortar rounds still fall, but wider. Less precise. They bracket empty ground, chew up already destroyed wall sections. Then, as ammunition or coordination runs low, they stop. Indirect fire is slackening. Someone shouts on the net, incredulous. They're off target. Her ladder shifts now. Without effective snipers, machine guns, RPG teams, or spotters in key positions, the attack spine is weakened. But the most insidious threat still hums in the background of her headset, the jammer. Somewhere out there, likely on a truck or a portable platform, a jammer is spewing enough concentrated signal to smother their long-range comms and choke off their calls for help. She starts scanning for the physical manifestation of that hum. In the mid-distance, behind a low ridge, she spots it. A boxy truck half camouflaged with netting. A tall antenna stabbed into the sky from its bed. A small cluster of figures in distinctive headsets and gear hunch around equipment. Target 5. She knows she can't explode the truck with the rifle she has. That's a job for heavier ordnance. But she can hurt it. Her first shot goes to the radio operator, identifiable by the way he's constantly relaying info back and forth between screens and a handset. She catches him in the upper torso. He drops, grabbing at his chest, then lies still. The others hunker down immediately, trained enough to know what a single well-placed shot means. Someone reaches for him, then pulls back as another bullet smacks into the ground nearby, sending dirt into the air. She shifts aim to the mast itself, specifically the point where the cables feed into its base. It's a thin target at this distance, especially through damaged glass, but she's not guessing. She waits for the lull between mortar impacts, when the air is as still as it will get. She fires. The bullet strikes just below the feed, severing a bundle of cables and knocking a key connector loose. The mast doesn't fall, but it shudders, and the cluster of gear at its base sparks briefly. In her earpiece, the static that has been a suffocating wall suddenly thins. Not entirely, not clean, but enough. The captain hears it too. Higher, this is Outpost Kilo. He barks into the long-haul radio, trying again. We are under coordinated attack by multiple elements. Mortars, heavy machine guns, possible jamming from North Sector. Request immediate air support and QRF. Over. For the first time since the ambush began, a clear, distant voice answers. Kilo, this is Overwatch. We read you weak, but readable. Say it again, jamming source. Mara doesn't smile. There's no time. But something in her chest loosens just a fraction. Tower 4 to command, she says over the local net. Jammer truck located just north of grid line 7, behind the middle ridge. Antenna compromised, but they're still partly functional. Copy, Tower 4, the captain replies. Higher. Did you copy that grid? We've got it, Overwatch says. QRF is rolling. Limited air en route. Hold. Hold. Easy word to say from far away. Harder to do with climbers on the move. Because the enemy is not stupid. They felt the pattern break. Sniper gone. machine gun silent, RPGs disrupted, mortar fire blunted, jammer coughing. Their response is fast. Fire from multiple positions shifts viciously toward the old tower. She can see the tracer streams altering course, feel rounds crack the air just meters away as they walk fire up the structure. Metal clangs and sparks. One burst takes a chunk out of the railing near her boots. In the shadows below the mast, movement. A small team, 4 or 5 figures, peels off from the main assault and begins climbing toward her along the base's outer structures, using blind spots and rubble for cover. They're coming to flank and kill the source of their pain. She doesn't have the luxury of addressing them yet. Not while something else unfolds near the intel building. Through the scope, she sees the enemy commander committing his reserve. It's subtle, the way a few held-back squads finally move, but unmistakable. They converge not on the gate or the motor pool, but on the alley leading to the server room. So that's the prize. A breacher carrying a satchel charge moves with them, flanked by riflemen and supported by a machine gun team setting up behind a low wall. If they blow the server room, they don't need to escape with anything. Destroying the data is victory enough. Mara's world constricts down to that alley for a moment. She tracks the machine gun team first. They're about to pin down the defenders rushing to reinforce the intel building. She fires. One machine gunner drops before he can fully settle behind the weapon. The assistant freezes, then instinctively throws himself flat, abandoning the setup. Good. That buys the defenders time. On the local net, the captain seizes the opening without needing the full story. Second squad, push to intel now, he orders. Use the sally port on the east wall. Tower 4, can you keep that alley clean? Working on it, she replies. The reserve fighters continue forward, led by a commander in a darker jacket, his body language controlled even under fire. He gestures sharply, signaling 2 to cover, 2 to move, keeping his formation tight. The breacher with the satchel stays in the middle of the pack, protected. She knows, in her bones, that he is the turning point. Take him, and cohesion cracks. Miss him now, and the fight gets ugly. The problem is everything between her and that shot. Mortars, though less accurate now, are still being fired, and some are starting to bracket her tower as the enemy tries to simply erase the problem with explosive where bullets are failing. One lands close enough to the base of the mast to make the entire structure ring like a struck bell. Shrapnel screams upward, punching through the metal platform in a spray. A jagged fragment grazes her cheek, opening a hot line that begins to drip into her eye. She wipes it away with the back of her glove, smearing red across the rifle stock, and keeps the scope to her face. Her cracked optic is worse now, a new fracture line spidering across the top. She adjusts again, finding a fresh sliver of clarity. Below, boots clang against the lower rungs of the tower ladder. The climbers are almost on her. She doesn't look down. She can't. She steadies the crosshair on the commander's chest. He pauses for a second, turning slightly to check something behind him, and in that tiny hesitation, the battlefield, the tower, the danger all fall away. There's only the target and her breath. She fires. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then his body jerks backward, arms flying out, the gesture he was making severed mid-motion. He crumples to the ground, the fighters around him recoiling in shock. Before they can react, she shifts aim a fraction and puts a round into the satchel carrier. The explosive charge tumbles from his hands, bouncing away from the door he was moving toward. Confusion erupts. Without their commander's signals, some of the attackers drop to cover and start firing blindly. Others hesitate, looking for orders that aren't coming. A few, farther back, begin edging away, instincts telling them what their discipline tried to suppress. The fight's tide has turned. In that moment of disruption, second squad bursts from the sally port, as ordered, hugging the wall, weapons up. They cut into the disoriented assault element from the flank, adding their own controlled bursts to the rising chaos. Mara finally has to look down. Boots clang again on the ladder below. A head appears at the edge of the upper platform, eyes wide under a dark headband. He's faster than she expected. She doesn't have time to transition the rifle. She lets it drop on its sling, and already finding the pistol at her thigh. The movement is pure reflex. Draw, push, front sight, press. The shot goes off at the same instant the attacker tries to haul himself over the rail. He falls backward, arms pinwheeling, body disappearing down the ladder shaft with a yell that cuts off abruptly. Another figure is right behind him. This one managed to grab onto the rail as his teammate fell, using the momentum to swing up. He ducks as her second shot cracks over his shoulder, then lunges forward, grabbing at the barrel of her pistol. They collide in a tight, brutal knot of limbs on a narrow platform. The tower sways slightly under the sudden shift in weight. He is stronger, but she is better at using angles. She lets the pistol go the moment his fingers close around it, pivots, and slams her elbow into his neck. He coughs, grip loosening. She drives her knee up into his thigh, uses his moment of imbalance to shove his shoulder toward the gap in the rail where a panel is missing. For a second, his boot squeals against the metal, struggling for purchase. Then he goes over. She doesn't watch him fall. She kicks his dropped pistol away from the edge and snatches her rifle back up, chest heaving now not from exertion, but from the spike and crash of close-quarters fear. Her hands are shaking, just a little. She squeezes them tighter around the stock until the tremor becomes a vibration she can manage. There's one magazine left on her vest. She slaps it in, feels the satisfying click, and goes back to work. Now, with their leadership shattered and their push toward the server room blunted by a flanking counterattack, the attackers begin to fracture.